All right, we are back with another American invasion. You're soon going to own this podcast, I think, Aaron. He's had to travel all the way back from America to kick me up the arse just to do another podcast.
This is how badly I want to hear the American trial scene represented. I just keep coming over for it.
But this is it, and you're introducing us to new, not new, but some of the listeners will be new to them, to hopefully go back and watch some of the original stuff. So without further ado, going all the way to the US of A, it's Readmershot. Let's hear it for him. Woo! How's it going,
Maddie?
Read?
Yeah, great. Maddie, Aaron, good to see you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. It's going to be fun to relive some of these old stories and back in the day where trials used to be, as I know it.
Yeah, and you're the one that brought us the vision of Aaron's tattoo on his back.
Oh yeah, it's in the third video, I think. Yeah.
Is it that too?
Yeah.
See, already people might not know the context. Aaron, do you want to maybe give some context? Like who's Reed? Who's this guy?
I think before we ask Reed who he is, I should tell you all about him. That'd be great.
That would be great because we have other things to talk about.
Okay. All right. So what I think is really important, and even if you haven't seen these films, like your experience in trials has been touched by the work that he's done, because the movies that he made inspired riders like Danny McCaskill to start getting into it and to try to emulate some of the riders in the films. And without Danny, there'd be a lot less trials riders out there. But on top of that, I think culturally in trials, these films were something that, at one point in our time, every single trials rider in the world knew all the words to all the songs in all of these movies. I mean, there was actually like a common thing besides riding that every trials rider had in common. This culture of the sport existed during Reed's era, and thanks to these films. So they're super important for so many different things. And,
Which, what are the films?
So there's Revolution, there's Evolve, and there's Contact. And I still have all of them. Yes, the trilogy.
So all of you, what you need, just to maybe, if you haven't seen them before you listen to this podcast, maybe go and watch them. I believe they're available, but they will be underneath the comments right now.
yeah, I'm sure they are.
Just for some context, but I'm sure some of the old schoolers and legit riders will really love this. Martyn's going to listen to this. Both Martyns.
We actually got some guest questions, so it's going to be a good one. But
nice.
But Reed, I think the best place to start is what prompted you? What got you excited to actually start making films in the first place? Where'd you start?
That's a really solid question. I was afraid you'd ask that. So I really got into mountain biking when I was in high school, and that's something that I really wanted to pursue. And I ended up getting a job at a local bike shop. I'm out of central Wyoming, which is kind of like right in the heart of the Rocky Mountains in North America. But I worked for a guy at a shop called Dr. Spokes Cyclery, which is kind of an interesting name. But
Spokes, like that.
Yeah, and I had like a little bit of background in BMX, and I kind of like to experiment and kind of push the envelope on what I could do in a mountain bike. But I really wasn't aware of the sport trials. Observed trials like hadn't even really come into my vocabulary until like 1992 or 3 probably. And
I was born in 92. Thanks. Yeah.
Oh,
Just
really?
to make
Good.
you feel old.
All right, son. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah. Go on.
So my boss was a GT dealer, and he gets a VHS cassette in the mail, and it is Hans No Way Ray. And he comes to me and he says, "You got to check out this film. Take it home, take a look at it." And literally like within 47.5 minutes, my entire life was changed. I knew what my calling was. I knew what I was interested in. I knew this pursuit that I was chasing and didn't really have a name to call it. I knew what it was then. And I thought, this is absolutely incredible. And that began my personal effort to become a trials rider. So I ordered a small aluminum 26-inch frame made by Giant at the time. There really wasn't anything available for actual trials bikes out there at the time, except for in the modified world. But, I like the 26-inch wheel. I like to get on that mountain bike road. And anyway, started coming up with what I thought was a good trials bike build, and just going out and riding more and watching these videos. And then eventually kind of got my head around, what the pedal kick was, and transitioning myself to flat pedals and single fingers on the brakes and things like that really can kind of help you
It's just
progress.
those fine details. That's right. Actually,
right.
It's a really good point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I kind of learned that without any outside guidance. And during that time, I graduated high school and I went to a local community college, and I was involved with the arts, and I pursued a degree in photography. So I had this photography experience, but really all I wanted to do was ride my bike. And
sounds familiar, right?
Yeah, I've heard that.
I know,
familiar.
right?
Yeah, I know that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So by some sort of fortune, I decided to move to Portland, Oregon. I had an opportunity to live there. I had some friends that were there in a house. They needed a roommate. And I thought, this is great. On the way out, based on like some old news groups, like the internet was really kind of primitive at the time. And, nobody was texting. There were no apps. There was nothing like that. But I heard of a place outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, where they had a trials course set up in a bike shop, and they had cars that you could ride on. And I thought,
awesome.
All right, how freaking cool is this? Yeah. Right. So I go there, literally moving to Portland. I've got my 20-inch GT modified on the roof of my Volkswagen. Next to that is, I'm trying to remember what I was riding at the time. I think, I don't remember what I was on. Pre-Norco. I'm pretty sure it was probably that Giant. But get to this place, and I immediately go to this big 1980s American car that's in this trial section in a shop, and proceed to ride over the car, and pedal kicking off the roof to some logs and things they had set up. And it was just the most fun ever to me. And the bike shop manager came up and he said, no one's been able to ride over that car. And I was like,
so it was already there in the intention of someone riding it, but they're like, no one has yet. Okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I spent some time there, and unbeknownst to me, the bike shop manager had actually called a film producer by the name of Thor Wixom.
No way.
Dude, do you remember Thor, Aaron?
Yeah. So Aaron does. Okay.
That's amazing.
He did. Yeah. No, he had a series of films. It was the Down series. So he did a lot of downhill type stuff. Do you remember Double Down
and Jib? Street trial film.
And Jib. Yeah, totally.
All
so
films that everyone has to watch, clearly. Yeah.
I know. We're going to bring back all the 640, 480 glory here and standard definition.
I'm so glad you
I apologize.
This is still VHS era. Just hold on.
I know, right? That's what even says it at the bottom of the thing. It just says VHS. I'm like, I was alive then, I promise.
Totally. Well, that was the format of the time. This is pre-DVD. I mean, this dates me big time. But anyway, this guy Thor shows up and he said, hey, I'm making a movie called The Ultimate Road Trip. And it's about trials and stunt riding and downhill and all that. And would you like to shoot in it? And I thought, well, yeah, of course. So I stayed an extra day, stayed at his house. He put me up, and we went out and we did a day shoot. And I really started to see kind of what was involved with this day shoot, and just kind of see what he was looking for. And it was, all urban style stuff. And it got my brain moving. I've got all this experience in photography, and what do I need to do to kind of shift this over to production and start getting into the movie side of things? All the while, I think I had an illusion that I would become a pro rider. But ultimately, I think the artistic nature in me with a backup plan. So, I competed at an expert level, and that was kind of about as far as I went. And anyway, so we did the shooting, and I get back out to Portland, and I stayed in touch with Thor, and ended up getting a job at a bike shop in Portland as an assistant manager. And during that time, somehow, based on some weird forum or news group, I was able to come across a VHS copy of a short video made of Ryan Leach. And Aaron, I don't know if you remember this video. I don't think many people saw it, but it had a soundtrack that was something about smoking marijuana, and it was techno, and it just kept repeating marijuana, marijuana, marijuana. It was this weird techno beat.
That's crazy.
And I remember thinking A, who picked the song, and B, who the F is Ryan Leach? This guy is just off the freaking chains, right?
So that was the first time you saw Ryan, on a screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
In this video.
In the video.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just, yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, Norco, Ryan Leach, what the hell is going on here? This is awesome. And then throughout some other newfangled forum or news group, I saw that there was a trials competition in Bellingham, Washington, and Ryan Leach was going to be there. So I thought, now's my time to start gathering some content, you know, and I had a relatively cheap video camera, but I had a lot of experience with kind of like older formats and film. So I had some Super 8 and regular 8 film format type things rolling, laying around that I'd eventually get into. And I'm going to back up just a little bit here. My roommates were in the production program at Lewis and Clark College. So that means they had access to nonlinear editing equipment. In the filmmaking world, old school editing is linear. It's A/B. It's splicing film. It's going A tape to B tape to the master, whatever that might be. And this is really fascinating to me. And in like 1997, it was totally out of reach for the consumer. So I decided to volunteer in this program at Lewis and Clark College. And my roommates were able to get me in and kind of show me the ropes for Adobe Premiere and Avid and like some of the early video editing softwares that were out there. And I would spend almost all night in the lab learning how to use this. So that's probably a pretty important component for me to go think that I can have a shoot with Ryan Leach, right?
just so that for some understanding, then really, without being able to produce a video like you did, you really had to know your stuff.
Yeah.
Like now, no, you don't.
Now you can do it on your phone.
I can just buy a phone and film it. But so back then, like that's what helped. You had a lot of knowledge in the editing kind of world, right? That's what I'm getting.
Well, yeah, it didn't start that way, but it was I was self-taught with the help of my friends and roommates, and I took the modest skill set I had and decided to go up and try and make a relationship with Ryan Leach to say, hey, I'd like to shoot some film with you. I'd like to go out and shoot some film with you. I think we can do this. I think I can get it out there. And that meant I had to get a Sunday off to go to this trials competition. So I went to work. I don't know what it was. It was about 10 days, 2 weeks before that Sunday. And I talked to my boss. His name was Brant. And I'm like, hey, Brant, here's what I'm thinking. He knows I'm into trials. I want to pursue a trials film. I'd like to produce it. And I want to feature Ryan Leach as one of these writers. This is my big opportunity to go out and introduce myself to him and try and get a relationship going. And he said, well, you're scheduled to work that Sunday, and the only guy that can really relieve you from the schedule is me. But I promised my wife I'd rub her feet on that day. So I'm afraid I can't cover for you. You can't have that day off. And I said, do you realize how much this means to me? This is a big opportunity, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. And this is not in my nature, but I looked him straight in the eyes and I said, fuck it, I quit.
Wow. So
and
that
I
could have been the most important choice of your career right now.
Yeah.
We just
that one choice.
That one choice where you're like, I'm going to please this guy. He's paying my way. You know what? F you. I have a bigger thing going on. All right.
And we are all better for it. Thanks, Reed.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So I made it up there. I met Ryan Leach. I met Robin Coop, who was we became fast friends. And, they realized that this wasn't an industry that I was just trying to capitalize on, that I actually rode and could ride and did compete and, gain their trust a little bit. And then I figured I better come up with some sort of promotional video to try and buy myself a relationship with a distributor. And oddly enough, Aaron, were you at Motorama 97 or was it 98? I can't remember. It was my first time going to Motorama. I think you were at one of those.
Yeah, I think it would have been maybe 98. Definitely, I saw you there.
Yeah. So Matt, Motorama is a farm show in Pennsylvania. And they had a moto trials competition there. And then ultimately they decided to add bicycle trials. And
it was a big event.
Yeah. So I was like, well, screw this. I went out to Pennsylvania with a camcorder, knowing a bunch of badass riders would be there, and ended up shooting probably about a day and a half with Jay Gregorovich, and put together a 3-minute reel to one NoFX song. And then started sending that out to distributors, trying to convince them that I could make a 45-minute sports video. And
like a teaser, right? Hey, look what I can do in this space of time. Imagine 45 minutes.
For context, Jay was like the Charlie Rolls of that era.
Okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That helps. Yeah.
Very, similar style, kind of Spanish influence, like big, powerful rider, precise. So went out and shot with Jay, and then that actually leveraged me into a deal with Crank, if you remember Crank with a Q. They were a mountain bike manufacturer. Yeah, they made downhill, they made pads, they made gloves, like accessories and things like that. So they said, well, okay, sign this document and we'll distribute your film with all of our other goods through all these bike shops, throughout North America. And I thought, okay, well, here we go. So my job was quit. My boss had been calling nonstop to get me to come back to work. And that's not what it was all about.
I promise I'll work the Sunday for you now. You're too late, buddy. Too late.
Oh, yeah. So, so I sold a car to raise a little bit of money and hit the road. And just started kind of following the Norba series with Ryan, a lot of it. Luckily, I was friends with Ryan. We could travel together, and then I got to meet a lot of the other pro riders and gain their trust and get out on shoots with them. And shortly after that, Revolution came out. Funny enough, though, the dude that wouldn't let me have the time off, he showed up to the Revolution premiere in Las Vegas at a club called The Beach, right? And it was like this crazy club. And the film went off and it was crazy and people liked it, and I'm like signing autographs thinking, what happened, like what's going on? And he rolls up and he's like, hey man, that was so cool, blah blah blah, because he was there for Interbike. It wrapped over Interbike, and I think I just kind of had a surprise smile with him but didn't converse with him. But I should have thanked them at the time for setting my self-employment career off.
Yeah, without you going against me, it wouldn't have driven me to maybe do one of what might have been, now as we've established, one of the most important choices that you made for all of the trials.
So after Revolution came out, how did anything change? I mean, what were you thinking in that era? I mean, were you already planning I gotta make a second one right away?
I'm ready for the next one,
I was ready for the next one. I knew what I wanted to do. Revolution, from an editing perspective and from a production perspective, was pretty rough around the edges. A lot of that had to do with the equipment I could afford, but a lot of that had to do with being kind of self-taught. The anthem to these films, like Aaron mentioned, is this kind of pop punk of the 90s, which I was really into, and, promoted shows in Wyoming before I moved to Portland. So also had kind of some relationships and some understanding of how that scene worked. And ultimately, that's why a lot of this music ended up in the film. That's kind of what drove me. It drove the energy. But those things kind of just meshed up really nicely, and created that that emotion out of the product that I was looking for. And once I started to kind of catch up with a little bit of technical know-how and a little bit more budget, and bought some digital equipment, and got more creative, bought some 16 millimeter equipment, and decided to kind of double down on the arts aspect of this. I think that's when I kind of really found my calling, mixing the sport and the art.
Yeah, someone needed to do it. As we say, you had to be an expert. Anyone can kind of do it now.
So
right.
Maybe now is good for my first guest question.
Yes.
This one comes to us from Jeff Lenosky.
Oh, what's up, Jeff?
Thanks, Jeff, for the question.
Yeah. He said, did you realize the significance of what you were doing when you were doing it? I guess this applies to all three of the films.
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's a good one.
Jeff, that's a really good question. And the answer is no.
Would you have, if you'd had, would you probably had more pressure, right? You wouldn't be as experimental, or you just kind of there was.
It would have been more pressure for sure. But, I look back at this now, and I went into this with almost no business experience. And that's not necessarily the best thing if you want to self-produce your own films and get them around the world, right? Having a business aspect of that is pretty important. I have that now. I didn't have that then. It was all art and passion, right? Which is cool, but because of that, I didn't really maybe necessarily realize what was going on. Not until I was in England for Bike 2000, Matt. That's when I realized that
2000.
I was
well, you weren't
9 years old. Yeah, I wasn't even 10. I was like a 9-year-old kid.
Reed may have like signed your forehead. Were you there?
Maybe. It's like, wait, did he sign my bike? I remember it. Yeah, I did have a mountain bike then.
Yeah, so funny. I was there. I had a distribution deal with Chili Video out of the UK. So they were a big action sports distributor at the time, and Chili was set up at Bike 2000. There's this giant speed trials course set up that was in the film, but they said, do you mind getting behind the booth and lining up to sign autographs? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then there was this giant line, and I realized then that I was kind of bigger in England than I was in the United States to some degree.
Okay. Well, as Trials is today, very much, yeah. In terms of like the spread, I guess we're a smaller island, but
yeah. But I say but we know it's a team effort. This was a DIY thing for me. It was pretty grassroots, but without the riders and without the friends and guys like Aaron that kept the stoke up, there wouldn't be any of this, because a scene is kind of self-feeding, and I was one component in that scene. The pros are another component, the amateurs were a big component, and just so everything was just kind of like wrapped up in this ball that was moving forward and snowballing a little bit. And technology for trials bikes and brakes and wheels and chain ring guards and things that we needed at the time that were not available started to kind of erupt. And there were a lot of like homemade products coming out, homemade brake boosters and things like that. It was like, so I think the timing was right to kind of like craft the real initiation and experimentation of this industry. And I look at it now and it's like, oh my God.
So ahead of its time, though.
Yeah,
that's what I would, so ahead of its time. People didn't realize, this will be the foundation of how to ride a bike well.
So is there any sort of, I mean, we're kind of bouncing around a little bit, but is there a memory that stands out for you as something from filming any of the 3 films that maybe your favorite story to tell, or something that maybe got left on the cutting room floor or anything like that?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. Oddly enough, this photograph just popped in I picked up an old hard drive the other day and pulled the photos off of it. And there was a scanned photograph of myself and Lance Trappy standing next to Miss Universe in Anaheim, California. And she was like, some like the overall fitness competition, like female bodybuilding. And there was a competition going on there, and we were in Anaheim for an event, and we were partying. This is right after Chris Clark had passed out, and we drew on his face with Sharpie. There was a knock on our door about 3 a.m, and I opened it up, and there's just this like gigantically jacked like bodybuilding woman, and she's looking at me pissed off, saying, "You guys need to quiet down. I've got a competition in the morning, and you're partying and all that." And I looked at her, and I mean, it was obvious what I needed to do. I said, "Can I get my photo with you?"
We'll chill out if you just take one photo.
Let's do a trade. We'll shut up if we can take a photo.
So I did, and Lance is out in the hallway next to me. It's a pretty funny photograph, but we had by every sense of the words, I think those times in my life were the glory days. When you're 22, 23 on the road, traveling, weeks at a time with professional riders and just riding every day. It's very surreal. All kinds of crazy things happen. I mean, right. We get in interactions with law enforcement, we have vehicles breaking down, we have injuries, we have equipment breaking, and I mean,
all the exciting stuff. Yeah.
all the exciting stuff. Yeah. And at the time, like, no cell phones. I would call Jeff on the phone. I still remember his phone number by heart, and say, "Hey, yeah, the 973."
Yeah, don't say it now. But
it still is the same phone number. Don't say it.
It's probably the same phone number. So just yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it probably is. Anyway, I talked to him and say, "What do you think about a San Francisco shoot?" Great idea. Okay, Ryan, are you in? I'm in. Okay, cool. We'll meet April 25th at Pier 43 on the Embarcadero, 2 weeks in advance. Okay, adios. See you then. We'd roll out, no cell phones, no other communication. halfway across the country.
God, I hope they turn up.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
are they going
right.
to show up? I'd
Right.
pull over and jump on a payphone and call my voicemail and realize that, like, okay, there's no messages. This is cool. And show up at noon at Pier 34, and there they were. And we just did our thing. And the fact that that worked is just absolutely mind-boggling to me.
It's
That's
pretty
a really
wild.
great story.
Yeah, we can barely organize a ride. It's normal with all the technology now. I want to go back to something you were talking about, broken equipment, and maybe one of the most famous stories that, if you haven't seen the series or the trilogy, you haven't heard this story. But Reed, would you mind retelling the Ryan Leach top tube story?
Oh, the anvil taint?
Yes.
He
Yeah.
dents
So
his bike. Come on, like,
Well,
you can tell the story.
yeah.
Go for it.
So Ryan has a taint made of steel. Obviously stronger than what was the Norco? Was it 8130? I can't remember the chromoly that they
Reynolds
used.
steel.
It was Reynolds, yeah.
Okay.
Is taint
So-
a UK word too?
I was literally to say it's like a type of.
It's it's down here, like right in between the business. That's the taint.
That's the taint.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
The medical term is
Taint your-
perineum, in case you're wondering.
Perineum.
No,
heard
Aaron, you're
that.
wrong. It's taint.
It's
All right,
taint.
we're going with
All
taint.
doctors say taint.
There's the context. Now that makes sense. It already sounds painful, and we haven't started the story.
So, I guess if you're going to dent a top tube, it's probably good to do it with what's in between versus what's in front, I guess. But
Yes.
Ryan, he was working on, I believe we were in California. I can't recall exactly, but I do remember the line he was riding, and it was a railing gap. And as can often happen with the slick railing gap, is when you bear down for that pedal kick, you lose traction. Maybe he was kind of lifting up a little early or not, I'm not sure, but he lost traction. So what happens when you're expecting the bike to go forward with the front end up and you lose traction in the back wheel, it's going to go forward. And it went forward, and the front wheel of the bike kind of jammed in the next railing, and he came straight down on the top tube, like feet up in the air off the pedals. And I could tell it was a pretty hard hit, and he jumped up in the air and he just looked down at his bike and said something like, "No way." And Jeff and I noticed immediately, and we just went, "Oh my God, did you really just dent your bike with your taint?"
It's just his body weight
Oh,
physically
yeah.
moved the metal on his frame.
It's not just like
It
a little
actually
dent
folded
either.
it. Yeah. So we'll have to cherry pick some of these clips and get them out there. But oh man, it was that was definitely one of the more unique problems.
I've never seen that in my experience of trials for sure.
Yeah.
Especially not on a frame like that. I mean, Ryan, what are you made of? Like, I'm sure he's going to listen to this. I hope so. But what a story.
I hope so too. Yeah, we had so much fun shooting. Ryan and I got to be pretty close, and spent a lot of time on the road together. We just had so much fun.
Is there anybody? I mean, Ryan and Jeff were kind of two of the main riders in all three of the films. Is there any rider that you wish you would have been able to shoot more with, or spend time with more, or just include more in the series, or anybody like that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, during my time in this sport, these riders might not have the relevance to today's riders, obviously. But I think one of the most influential riders for me, other than Hans Ray, was Libor Karas. I scheduled a shoot with Libor. We went out. We were in Northern California. There were these big giant redwoods we were riding around, and it was going to be a really good shoot. And I remember that, like, the second line he did, he destroyed his freewheel. And that shoot was over. So I feel like that's not really a regret, but I wish I would have shot with him a little bit more. And I think that goes with like some of the Brits too, like Chris Ackrig and the Martyns. Obviously, I really didn't get to do too much with the Martyns. I came over and did a little shoot in Stratford, which was pretty fun.
Yeah, and a lot of those spots aren't there anymore. When I looked through,
Oh, they're not. Really?
Yeah, they're changed ever so slightly. Stratford's very much built up. That's where they built the 2012 Olympics area. So they knocked down
gotcha.
miles of it. And for people who don't know, that's in the Contact movie, and there's some great, some great stuff with Martin Hawes and Martyn Ashton. As you said, which made it great for me. I was like, oh, he's been to the UK. He filmed the other,
he was big in the UK.
Yeah, right.
There's an MBUK shoot. So that same shoot, there was a photographer that went along, and there's an MBUK photo shoot for that day we spent out there, and it's really cool. Jay Grigorovich was there. I'm trying to remember. I think I do believe Chris Ackard was there. It was kind of a little powerhouse crew, and you know how these street sessions
Eddie
go.
Tung,
right?
Eddie Tung's in it. Yeah, I saw him.
Eddie Tung was there. Eddie Tung
yeah.
as well. Yeah, and man, it was so much fun to shoot with those guys, and they just had a different energy than kind of the North American scene. It was almost like wound a little bit tighter, almost a little more ready to explode.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Do you think it was because of their, like, obviously Martin and Martin had this rivalry, which was like a healthy / kind of pushing each other? Did you feel the difference in cultures between like American riders and UK riders?
Yeah, I did. And it was kind of more of like maybe the philosophical approach. I'm not sure. I think that, the Americans might have been a little bit more cavalier about things, and the Brits might have been maybe a little more calculated and technical.
Okay.
I mean, that could have been just my perception at the time, but that's kind of the feeling I got. But nonetheless, you've been to the world events. It doesn't really matter. The common interest is riding and riding well and getting better and winning ultimately, right? So, so I mean, that common bond was overwhelming for sure.
So, you did that shoot in the UK. That was in Contact, but then Contact was the third film in your trilogy. Is there a reason why there isn't a fourth film, or you didn't carry on? I mean, it seemed like it was going pretty well.
Yeah, it was going well, and I don't really know. I think kind of just my mentality changed, and I think I was saturated of spending a lot of time on the road. It was a pretty tireless effort to edit and package and put together a film, on a deadline. I think if I were to do this again and had a better business head on my shoulders, then I think I probably could have gotten deeper distribution and monetized it a little bit better and made it something that, I could have made, a full career out of, and I was able to support myself with calculated risk films, but it wasn't something that got big enough to cause itself to grow, if that makes any sense. It's like I never had that revenue to kind of reinvest in the projects, and I realized that I needed some business experience, and I had an opportunity to join with a few partners and start a business. We actually started a coffee house in 2002, which is kind of a simple enough business to get my head wrapped around that. And that really kind of got me off on more of a business directive versus the arts and production. I did freelance production for a while, but, I really wasn't interested in shooting what other people found interesting.
Just kind of absolutely, yeah. I feel that too. Yeah. I'm like, you try to make it for others. No, I'm going to do this because I like it, and they can watch it if they want.
I mean,
exactly.
Fast forward however many years, but like what you did was, what someone would consider to be like you were one of the original content creators.
Yeah. The technology wasn't there. Had you done this, maybe now, right, would be a very
So I guess like
totally different.
Take everything that you learned from all of the films that you put out, plus the business sense that you've built over the last 20 plus years. What advice would you give the next Readmershot who's hopefully listening to this right now?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, honestly, I think I think there's a secret formula for the success in a frontier business, and I think that starts with passion and energy. Without passion and love and energy, you can't really keep yourself motivated to pursue the structure of the business side. I found motivation in breaking the rules a little bit, breaking the traditional rules of sports production and trying to do things a little bit different. But there is no substitute for hard work, right? I mean, you hear that a lot, but you're not going to become a better rider just wanting to be a better rider. You've got to go out and, do the 200 side hops a day or whatever you're working on, and get that stuff dialed in. But I think pursuing your passion and not quitting and knowing your brand. And your brand, that's kind of a broad way to say it, but your brand is your product, and your product is your passion. And you kind of have to have a niche that you live in, and realize, like, you want to deliver something original, and something that has value to your viewer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of a generic sense, but if I were to redo things now with digital media, my God, would things be different?
Right. Yeah. The accessibility to, like you say, as a
Yeah.
consumer now, like, it sounds. I didn't go to college for video and that kind of thing. I did go for audio, and hence why we're here, I suppose. You can revert back to Aaron's interview of me, and then you'll see why. But exactly, that's that kind of point. It was so limited back then that without you kind of pushing that, and now people know that they can do that. I'd like to see a new Reed video.
Yeah. What would, I mean, go further. Like, what would, if you picked up a camera today?
Oh, yes.
And you had access to all the riders in the world like you did previously. I don't know. I'm not actually sure. Are you if you're still keeping up with the sport or whatever? But like, what would, like, no budget concerns? You can have whatever camera you want. You can have whatever rider. What stories would you tell? Like, what would that look like?
Oh, that's a really good. That's a great question.
Yeah, he's got a few.
Yeah, I think I would dive more into the inside, the mentality, the preparation of the sport, and get more into the individual athlete. When I was shooting back in the day, it was all about the line. It was all about the trick. It was all about the move. And I think I missed a lot of things that can help build a scene even better. And that would be what's going on in Aaron's head, what's going on in Ryan's head. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I would kind of like to glorify the athlete and their actual pursuit a little bit more. And I think probably have a little less, like in my films, in the 3 films that I produced, I jammed so much riding into them. There really wasn't much room for anything else, but that's what I wanted to see. Maybe as I've gotten a little bit older, I just kind of want to know what's behind the scenes a bit more. So I think that's probably the approach I would take. And, but there's also really no substitute for the grassroots, like street skating style sessions that we've had, to put together the films that I built. There was a real magic to not knowing what was going to happen. There was real magic not knowing what lines you were going to do that day, and how risky or how great or how bad they might be.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything that we've completely missed as a sport? I mean, we have so many discussions about how come the sport isn't bigger? What are we doing? We're not getting this kind of support. I mean, you've been outside of it for long enough and had a chance to be on the outside looking in a little bit, but did we miss something? I mean, we had a good run going around the time that your films were coming out. Like, things were getting better, more riders were, turning pro. I mean, again, like I said at the beginning, it's like a rider like Danny McCaskill saw Ryan Leach and thought, that's for me, I'm going to be that, and then ended up doing that.
And he wouldn't have seen it without Reed.
Torch, right? And so, like, a handful of riders made it through into that next era of success, but like the sport in general didn't continue growing at the same pace. Did we miss something along the way? Is there something we forgot to do?
Yeah, I have no idea.
That's a good. I don't think anybody knows.
I can only look at it from kind of a societal influence type level, and knowing that I think the age of digital communications and internet may have been a little bit counterproductive to the small group of people that might go out and pursue bike trials, right? Okay. I think bike trials is its own worst enemy, because it's so hard. The hours that it takes to become a beginner are huge, and the hours that it takes to go from beginner to intermediate are bigger, and the time it takes to go from intermediate to advanced or expert is even bigger. So there's this exponential climb to get to the point where you can even do a simple pedal kick like the guy you've just watched on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. So I think that a lot of sports that are really hard don't really grow quite as quickly, because I think they're less accessible to the athlete. What do you guys think about that?
Yes, I mean exactly that. I mean, patience is something with trials that you have to. Funny, and I have none, but somehow I'm in trials. Somehow, no, and I think you're right. The accessibility, it is bigger now. Maybe I think when they were watching your videos in they kind of just saw like extreme mountain biking.
Correct.
Those people, like you just said, they didn't know that was trials. There were people, maybe Danny, like we're using Danny McCaskill as another example, but maybe he didn't know that was trials. He was like, well, there's a bike, you can do that.
Yeah, that could very well
maybe
be.
Like, I mean, I'm thinking out loud, but maybe like categorizing it in that way damaged it. I don't know. I might be wrong. Again, this is topic of conversation.
Danny and I had this discussion a couple months ago, and I was like, should we just start calling it something else? Because does trials even mean anything?
Right, just call it extreme biking. Like, it's so basic and simple. It's bang on the tin, like, oh, he's cycling. Damn, that's extreme.
Because here's the thing that I always push on. It's like, oh, it's really hard. Well, so is skateboarding. Skateboarding's insanely hard, and it's really scary.
Right.
At least on a trials bike, you can just put your foot down. On a skateboard, that thing shoots out from underneath you.
Right. And you made a good point. The accessibility.
Yeah.
Everyone has access to skating. So it's almost like, oh, everyone tried to skate and found out it was hard. Does that mean everyone should try and find trials and like, well, it's still hard. Like any sport, you want to get good at something, you put the time in.
Yeah. And, you look at the market, you've got, this isn't necessarily coming completely from business. This is just more of like understanding like the mix of people that we have. But, the outdoor sports industry is a giant industry worldwide. And one section of that is cycling. And one section of that is mountain biking or gravel or whatever you're doing. And then even a smaller subsection of that is trials, right? So you have this really finite focus on like the core of the sport. I think, when I did it, there wasn't much of a differential between a stock trials bike and a mountain bike. They were pretty much the same. So you could really kind of do what these guys were doing on what you already had to some degree.
Right.
You could still do that, but there's a very big visual and technological divide between a trials bike and a mountain bike right now.
Right. So people look at it and go, oh, he can do that because he's on a special bike.
I'm going to put a seat on my Krugers.
This is part of it, It's like, is that what we need to be doing? Like, oh hey, look at this little seat, Someone made a really good comment earlier, a few days ago on YouTube, like, trials bikes are so ugly, but I love the sport. And I've never heard anyone say it like that, because obviously to me, anything unique to me is beautiful, or and different, and maybe that's why people just feel, oh well, if I'm going to get into that, I have to be really specific. I can't just pick up my mountain bike, because that's how I got into it. I was like, I have a mountain bike. Wait, he just did that on a bench. I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why this generation is struggling. We have less riders because they can't just go, I'm going to give that a go, because they're like, well, now I have to buy a bike.
Fair, totally fair.
I don't know.
Maybe, and keep in mind, like, I'm guessing.
But it's good to hear a different perspective on it too.
It's part of the topic conversation. We want the sport to grow. I mean, it's now the only cycling discipline that's not in the Olympics. Am I wrong?
Downhill mountain biking is not in the Olympics.
Oh yeah,
but they're probably next.
Damn it! It's like, damn it!
The IOC needs to get it together here.
Yeah, or what I really want to try and drill to others is how they understand that maybe the word trials should be used in a lower tone, where you're like, well, once you know how to ride trials, then you can be a good mountain biker.
Mm-hmm.
That's
it's true, but slow is fast, right?
Right.
I mean, if you can effectively ride trials, and you can track stand, and you can do your basic hops and anything like that, like, you can make your cross country experience better, you can make your downhill experience better, and so on. When I grew up riding, like, I started pursuing trials, and I was literally made fun of by the local cross country guys. They would say, oh, here's Sideshow Bob, or, go join the circus or whatever.
Yeah,
and, like,
exactly. He's clowning around.
And that, I think, just based on kind of my attitude. Yeah, he's clowning. Yeah. But that motivated me more. I mean, but that's my personality. That kind of adversity tends to motivate me. And
the question I was going to ask is, do you still get the itch to ride trials? Do you still have section tick where you're spotting lines as you kind of roll around still? Like, is it still in there?
Yeah, without a doubt, it is. I just bought a new mountain bike a couple months ago, and oddly enough, it's my first mountain bike with 29-inch wheels, which is really fun. But of course, I bought a hardtail, right? But yeah, I absolutely, you see those lines, you scope the lines. I look at manual lines, I look at gaps, I look at all that. And I occasionally ride. I've got an inspired hex that I still ride occasionally, but
Nice.
Nice.
I'm kind of like more of old man trials right now. I'll do some stuff on the trail that will get some looks, but I'm really not kind of going out and doing those hard sessions like I used to.
You're still above probably the rest of the trail riders because, like, hey, I'm gonna ride along that log, and then all of a sudden, like, how does he do that? And you're like, well, you should have really started trials.
Okay, so you said that you're riding an inspired hex for fun.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
how closely are you following trials now? I mean, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing?
What I'm seeing now is absolutely unbelievable. Like the basically, in my day, some of the things that were pioneering for technique, like some of the big pedal kicks, are now like transitioning into like a lot of this front wheel stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot more emphasis on using more of the bicycle, which I really appreciate. And
Yeah.
obviously the geometry and the way that these modern bikes are set up with a big long forward stem and bars rolled forward to effectively get that mechanical advantage out of your body more effectively in unison with the bicycle is really impressive. So technologically, mostly by design, we're not looking at revolutionary new materials or new brake technology or anything like that. It's just getting better, right? But watching these guys, hook up on a 2-meter wall with their front wheel with this big fat fork that can handle that opposite stress of pulling up on the head tube and then make that transition to bash ring or to back wheel. I mean, that stuff we couldn't even fathom that in the 90s.
Right, you couldn't physically
Like,
do that on the bike. Like the bars would be in the way. You couldn't
yeah.
right.
So because of those changes in geometry and like attention to the mechanical advantage that a bike can provide if used correctly, it is insane. Like, I mean, I'll watch like Andre or whoever on obviously my Instagram feed is pretty heavy in trials, motorcycle and bicycle trials, but man, it is so far beyond what I ever would have guessed 20 years ago. It's
Right.
really cool.
I guess to do the extreme moves, you have to have the most extreme bike. Like it's just oh, your handlebars are like on the floor. Oh, great. So that means that because of that you can do this. That means I can get my body over the front wheel and kiss my tire whilst still on the pedals. But no, that's interesting. There was the way that you described that I felt was perfect in terms of like how the progression was. So many people are like, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of it's been driven from the European side of things, right? Look at the bikes they are now. They're Spanish, French companies. Like, then why do we think America didn't do that?
It's hard to say. I mean, the Americans too. A lot of the like the GT mod bike and some of the kind of entry level, not even entry level, but the mass produced trials bikes, for lack of a better term, came from America. And then it sort of switched over to like competition bikes.
Right.
We're all in Europe, so maybe
it's a really good point, though, Reed. As Aaron says, you've been out the sport for a while, so you've been able to really look on it from another view.
Exactly.
And understand the growth and whatnot.
Yeah.
And Danny's and Fabio's bikes were made for them, and then you weren't even able to buy them for years.
Right. Yeah. It's been a really cool progression. And when I kind of exited the sport, like, I still rode, but I didn't really keep track of everybody for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and then look back and things were a little bit different. And then I got really into motorcycle enduro riding, kind of hard enduro. I don't do hard enduro. I do like maybe a little hard enduro, but got into that. And then that was my passion. And that's kind of what I followed on 2 wheels. And then I picked up a moto trials bike and then started kind of looking back into the bicycle world like 5 or 6 years ago. And then that's when it was like, oh my God, look where things are going. This is really cool. And even in that period of time, in the last 5 years, things have gotten so much more crazy.
Yeah, and where's it going to go now? Where do you see the future of trials, Reed? What can you like envision?
Oh wow, that's a really good question.
I don't think anyone knows. I just like to see.
Please help. Tell us where to go.
Like, where do we go? What's going on?
Yeah, where do we go? I think inherently it has to get more technical, because things can only get so big before I think the safety threshold is,
Yeah.
it becomes to be a really big component. But I like the idea of it going more technical, more technical lines. And I'm not even sure that's possible right now, but with the
It
way things
definitely
are
is
going.
the way it has, but it's true to state. Back in the 90s, doing a drop off, you'd film it. You'd be like, that's cool. And now people go, you're going to drop off that? You're stupid.
Right.
You're
Yeah,
like,
totally.
the bikes don't, it's not steel. No, that's carbon. Yeah, that will break or whatever. So,
Yeah. Aaron, do you remember Cristiano Santos dropping off that 13-foot log?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then,
Giant
so,
drops.
yeah, giant drops to flat, on a mod bike. And guys are doing crazy, stupid stuff back then. I can't believe the equipment held up to it.
yeah, that is, especially like, it wasn't only that. They're like, wait, does your body handle this? Like, how much does the bike take? And yeah, no, Reed, this has been fantastic, man.
Yeah.
We could talk for hours and hours, and I know we could. Maybe we'll just have to do another one.
Yeah,
now that Aaron's coming.
Truly felt the pressure. A lot of riders from our era are starting to pick up bikes again and starting to ride. Whether they got like the Inspired X or picking up and dusting off their old bikes. So I felt the pressure to make sure that we got this one done right, because there's a lot of people out there that were so heavily influenced by what you did, and just to hear even a little bit of that insight is like, it's pretty special. And just thanks for being here. And
yeah,
I mean, you've made such a huge impact on the sport that still to this day resonates. I mean,
yeah, and I don't know if anyone hasn't told you before, thank you so much for doing that, man. Like, I know it's some big life decisions for you, as we've just heard in that story, and there'll be a lot of trials riders in my era who won't know who you are. They'll maybe know the videos. But hearing the conversation we've had and your kind of view, I think this has been a really, really educating podcast and really an eye-opener.
Yeah.
Again.
I really appreciate it, guys. Honestly, like, it's flattering to hear that. It's flattering to hear that I made an impact on the industry. And, the fact that I think if I can have a bit of a legacy with that, is a life well lived. One thing I want to throw out there, any video producers or editors out there, I've had an idea over the past year or so where I have a lot of this raw footage on digital video.
Interesting.
Some of it is originated in film, some of it is video, but maybe an editor would like to pick up some of that and do a little bit of a throwback. I'm involved in a different business now where I wouldn't have the time to do it. But maybe somebody could get in touch with me and have like a little bit of a YouTube B-side or something like that.
Sounds, I mean, I'm running a playlist on the Shindig channel called The Archives, which, so to speak, like, I've just pulled out about 9 old videos that I made many, many years ago that people may not have seen. So maybe that can tie in with that. Same with Danny Holroyd. He sent me a video and we worked out some clips, and it was like brought from the archives. So there is 100%. I know a guy who's pretty good at editing. I know a guy who may have a channel. I have a channel. I
didn't want to volunteer anybody, so I figured I would start really broad.
I think we'll be able to find someone to take you up on that.
I think so.
It's really our duty to uncover that footage and share it with the world.
And now that we've said it, these people could be like, hey, where's this video you're talking about?
We're on the hook.
Especially Martyn Horse has my phone and he's calling me like, yo, bro, this is what I wanted on the podcast, but now I want the footage.
Right?
Yeah, this has been really, really fantastic, man. And thank you so much for your time. I like to think that in the future we'll cross paths, hopefully,
I'd love that.
Yeah. It seems like I may be coming over to the US a little bit more. This year will be the first kind of Shindig content collaboration with Super Rider. I'll be there for some time. There's a lot of fun things that's going to be happening.
Yeah.
That
I love it. Let's get together. Why don't you guys need to get out to Wyoming? We'll get you on dirt bikes.
That sounds pretty good.
That sounds awesome. Yeah,
All right.
I do love that. That sounds really, really great. So thank you very much, Reed. I've been Matty P.
Aaron Lutzy.
And Reed, thank you so much for joining us. Guys, we're going to put the links for those videos and films that we've just spoken about. Amazing videos. If you haven't seen them, absolutely need to watch. Like, we're the sport that you love and you listen to this podcast. Without this man, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be out there. So we'll say it again. Thank you so much, Reed.
Thanks, Reed.
Yeah, thank you.
Man, it's been
Matty,
awesome.
thank you. Aaron, thank you. And for the viewers, just forgive the quality of the format. It is standard def. So
back in the day, though, that was the thing. That was
that was
cutting
it.
edge.
That's
That
all
was
we
it.
had. 640, 480. That was tops. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Reed.
You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, man. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for the opportunity.